Chapter 1: Birth of a Brotherhood. Snow fell in slow, quiet sheets over Jerusalem, blanketing the broken streets in a pale shroud. The city, still scarred by years of bloodshed, seemed to hold its breath as 9 men approached a dilapidated stable on the outskirts. Their boots left deep impressions in the snow, each step deliberate, each breath visible in the cold morning air. Inside the stable, the smell of old hay and rotting wood clung to the rafters. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the roof, tracing thin silver lines over the worn faces of the men. At their head stood Jacques de Molay, not a man of nobility or wealth, but a man whose resolve hardened with every trial life had thrown at him. His cloak was frayed, his sword chipped, his expression carved with purpose. They gathered in a circle, the cold biting through their threadbare garments. Each man shared the same look, determination born from faith, exhaustion born from war. They whispered their vow not as warriors seeking glory, but as guardians accepting burden. They would protect Christian pilgrims traveling the perilous routes to the Holy City, roads infested with bandits, raiders, and mercenaries who preyed on the unarmed. Soon after their vow, the harsh reality of their mission greeted them. A group of pilgrims, poor families, priests, merchants were ambushed on a narrow road. The 9 knights, their cloaks soaked with dirt and sweat, charged into the fray without hesitation. Their armor mismatched, their weapons battered, the battle quickly devolved into raw survival. Steel clashed in close quarters, boots scraping against the stones. One knight fought with a dented shield barely holding together, another with a sword nicked so badly it caught on bone. They fought like cornered wolves, efficient, vicious, unyielding. Word of their ferocity spread faster than any banner could. They were monks, yet warriors, pious, yet merciless when defending the helpless. Many who witnessed their battles claimed the 9 fought with a discipline that seemed impossible for men so poorly equipped. Their lives changed the day King Baldwin II summoned them. The king studied them carefully, these strange knights who lived with nothing, fought with everything, and asked for no reward. He saw in them not ragged soldiers, but a foundation. He granted them a headquarters within the ancient structure, known as the Temple of Solomon. The massive stone walls loomed above them like silent guardians as they stepped inside. The halls were dark and cold, filled with the dust of centuries. Torches cast flickering light across walls carved with symbols long forgotten. Some chambers descended into the earth, twisting into narrow passages that breathed stale air. Rumors began immediately, whispers that the knights were not merely protecting pilgrims, that they were searching, that the depths beneath the temple held secrets the church desperately wanted. Some claimed the knights unearthed relics buried since the Age of Kings. Others believed they found forbidden texts left behind by ancient civilizations. But those chambers remained silent. Whatever truths the 9 discovered in the shadows of the Temple of Solomon stayed buried, beneath stone and secrecy. Chapter 2: The Crusades. The sun hung low over the horizon, a blood-red disk casting its glow across the cracked earth. War drums echoed across the plains as armies gathered like storm clouds. The Crusades had begun reshaping the world, and in that crucible of fire and faith, the brotherhood forged in a humble stable was about to become legend. From the battlements of a battered fortress near Antioch, the newly formed Knights Templar watched countless banners ripple in the desert wind. They saw the arrival of seasoned crusaders, knights clad in polished steel, noblemen commanding retinues of armored riders, mercenaries with scars that told their stories. Compared to them, the Templars looked almost out of place. Rough cloaks, worn chunmol, weapons salvaged from the dead. But there was something different in their eyes, a steadiness, a conviction. Their first major battle ignited without warning. A cloud of dust rose from the south, Saracen cavalry charging with terrifying speed. The sound was like thunder, hooves slamming the ground, arrows slicing through the air. Older crusaders wavered in formation, shouting orders that drowned beneath chaos. The Templars did not waver. Jacques de Molay called his men to formation with a single motion. Shields locked, shoulders pressed tight, they formed a wall, unyielding, disciplined, just as they had practiced in the narrow courtyards of the Temple of Solomon. The cavalry struck them like a hammer. Horses reared, blades scraped against shields, arrows clattered harmlessly off disciplined ranks. The Templars stood as if rooted to the earth itself. Then, when the moment came, they advanced. It was not a charge born of frenzy, but a measured, relentless push. Their steps synchronized, their shields moving like the armored plates of some great beast. They forced the enemy back inch by inch, each movement precise. Veteran crusaders who witnessed the manœuvre stood stunned. They had expected panic, they saw perfection. The Templars' reputation sharpened in each battle to follow. At the siege of Ascalon, they fought through swirling dust storms, swinging their blades with grit even as sand strung their eyes. They held a breach in the wall so fiercely that wounded soldiers crawled out of their way rather than risk slowing them. At the fall of Udasa, they guarded fleeing civilians, escorting them through streets lit with burning towers. Even surrounded, they refused to abandon the helpless. But nothing compared to Hutun. The heat was a living thing, a furnace that devoured breath and strength. Armor burned against the skin. Men collapsed from exhaustion before ever raising a sword. The Crusader army, trapped on the barren hills, suffered under the relentless assault of Salah ad-Din's forces. The Templars once again took the front line, shielding those behind them even as smoke filled the air and thirst clawed at their throats. When the final horn sounded and the Crusaders' line broke, the Templars did not retreat. They fought in a shrinking circle, refusing to give an inch. The ground became slick beneath their boots. Their shields cracked, their blades dulled to bludgeons. Captured, they were offered life in exchange for renouncing their order. None accepted. Witnesses said they knelt in silence as the executioners lifted their blades. They died standing in purpose, if not in posture. Even their enemies spoke of their courage with uneasy admiration. Hutun shattered armies. But it forged the Templars into something more than soldiers. It turned them into symbols of defiance, of faith, of a discipline that bordered on frightening. Chapter 3: Empire of Gold. The wind that swept across the stone ramparts of the Templar stronghold at Acre carried the scent of the sea, salt, tar, and the faint aroma of spices unloaded from distant ports. Below, in the bustling harbour, ships bearing the Crimson Cross rocked gently against the waves. Their sails, marked with years of sun and storm, stretched like the wings of great white birds preparing to take flight. War had forged the Templars' reputation, but what came next forged their power. After the battles, after decades of shielding pilgrims and fortifying the Holy Land, the Order expanded across continents. New recruits arrived from every corner of Christendom, sons of nobles seeking honor, sons of peasants seeking purpose. Half arrived with hope in their eyes, the other half arrived with ghosts. Their castles rose like stone giants, massive keeps built on cliffs, ridges, and valleys. Crecked dust chevaliers, Tama, Tartussa, each fortress a testament to their growing prestige. These were not simply military installations, they were symbols of authority. But inside the walls, something more subtle, something far more powerful took form. It began with coin. A weary pilgrim arriving in Paris could leave his pouch, filled with the savings of a lifetime, in the hands of a Templar clerk. He would receive a handwritten note, sealed and marked with a code known only to the Order. When he reached Jerusalem weeks or months later, another Templar would read that note and return his wealth. No brigand, no storm, no betrayal on the road could steal what the Templars protected. As their network grew, so did their influence. They created counting rooms where men meticulously colored gold. They designed coded ledgers that only senior members could decipher. They stored wealth inside vaults so fortified that even kings unveiled their construction. Their financial system became the backbone of Crusader logistics. Soldiers were fed because Templar clerks approved payment. Horses were shod because a Templar banker released funds. Fleets sailed because the Order financed expeditions. And kings, men who commanded armies, found themselves kneeling across Templar tables, signing agreements that bound their crowns to the Order's influence. King Philip IV of France was among them. He entered a Templar treasury in Paris once, flanked by guards, expecting to find riches he could seize. Instead, he found rows of clerks, shelves stacked with locked chests, and a stern Templar master who reminded him that the gold was not his to touch. The memory burned. Voices spread rumors of treasures guarded within hidden Templar vaults. Some spoke of relics, splinters from the true cross, sacred vessels, pieces of ancient cloth believed to bear divine marks. Others whispered of secrets far older, scrolls recovered from beneath the Temple of Solomon, writings that challenged what the world believed. Monks called these tales heresy, scholars dismissed them as superstition. But the Templars themselves offered no explanations. In a dim vault beneath the fortress of Acre, a hooded knight ran his hand along a sealed chest bound with iron. Wax dripped along its edges, imprinted with a symbol of the Order. He exhaled slowly, the torchlight dancing across his face. Whatever lay inside, he guarded it with his life. Gold was power. Secrets were something deeper. The Order had transformed from a humble brotherhood into an empire. Their wealth could move armies, topple debts, and influence kings. And power like that never went unnoticed for long. Chapter 4: The Trap. The desert wind howled across the shattered plain, as if the earth itself were warning of what was to come. To the west, the sun bled out across the horizon, casting long crimson shadows over the dunes and broken stone arches left behind by empires that had risen and fallen long before the men approaching them were born. The Ottoman scout Udum crouched low atop a crumbling ridge. Dust clung to his lips. Sweat soaked the collar of his tunic, but his eyes, sharp, unblinking, tracked movement far in the distance. Torchlight, a cluster of it, flickering like fireflies. "They're coming," he whispered. Behind him, a column of janissaries waited in absolute stillness. Their white felt hats glowed faintly in the dying light, their hands steady on the hilts of their yataghans. They made no sound, they needed none. For weeks they had marched under orders from the Sultan himself. Intercept the European envoys, Rumorud, to be traveling with maps to sacred vaults buried beneath Jerusalem, vaults said to hold relics powerful enough to sway the faith of nations. But this was not merely a mission. It was a trap. And they were not the hunters. Far off in the growing dark, the torches halted, a banner lifted, and for the first time, Udum saw the sigil embroidered on the cloth, a gold lion with its jaws open wide. English. He ducked back beneath the ridge, heart pounding. "Captain," he hissed, "it is them. They are fewer than expected, perhaps 30 at most." Captain Sumra did not look surprised. His jaw tightened beneath his neatly trimmed beard. "Because the rest are already here," he murmured. The words had barely left his lips when the first volley of arrows screamed in from the east. Udum threw himself flat. Arrows shattered against the rocks. One ripped through the hood of a janissary who hadn't ducked fast enough, embedding itself in the skull beneath. He fell without a sound. Sumra rose with a roar. "Shields, shields up," he bellowed. But the archers were not European. Their arrows bore the black fletching of the desert tribes. Paid killers, mercenaries hired by someone with deep pockets and a deeper hunger for the relics. Mori arrows rained down. Mori bodies fell. And through the chaos, through the screams and breaking shields, something else moved. It's not men. Not horses. Something faster. Shadows. Udum blinked, certain the heat was tricking him. But then one shadow leapt from the rocks, tackling a janissary with inhuman speed. The soldier's blade flashed once, too slow, and then a sickening crack echoed as his neck twisted the wrong way. Sumra cursed. Assassins, they sent the turned, defensive circle move. Udum's blood went cold. The turned. Once they had been men, holy warriors who had drunk from forbidden wells beneath the Syrian mountains. The water had granted them impossible strength, impossible endurance, and an impossible hunger, a hunger for the living. The desert tribes had unleashed monsters. Udum backed against the ridge, breathing hard as the shadows closed in. Screams tore across the battlefield. Steel clashed with bone. Men were dragged into the dark by creatures that moved too quickly to track. The English watched from afar, torches flickering as they held their ground. They did not interfere. Because this was their trap. And the Ottomans had walked directly into it. Udum pulled his dagger free, though his hands trembled. A shadow detached itself from the rocks. A figure tall, skeletal, its skin stretched thin, its eyes glowing faintly like embers left in a dying hearth. It smiled. Udum lunged, screaming. The creature blurred. Pain exploded in his ribcage. He hit the ground, choking on air that refused to fill his lungs. Stars swam in his vision. The creature bent over him. "You bring maps," it hissed, voice like sand dragged over bone. "Maps to the vaults, where are they?" Udum spat blood in its face. He would rather die than reveal the Sultan's secrets. The creature raised a clawed hand. But before it struck, something loud and metallic clanged behind them. A flare of blue light ignited. The creature recoiled, screeching. Udum forced his eyes open. A man stood at the ridge, holding what looked like a long cylindrical lantern etched with ancient runes. The blue glow pulsed like a beating heart. The assassins hissed and fell back. The English envoys froze. Even the desert archers paused. The man with the lantern stepped forward. His voice carried like thunder. Enough. The battlefield obeyed. Not because of who he was, but because of what he carried. A relic. one powerful enough to make monsters afraid. Erdem tried to speak, anything, but darkness closed in around his vision. He passed out with the image burned into his mind. A glowing blue lantern. A man standing alone. And hundreds of killers too terrified to move. The trap had been set. But its true target was only now revealing itself. Chapter 5: The Trial. The great hall was dim, lit only by thin shafts of light that pierced the dust-heavy air. Rows of monks, nobles, and merchants filled the benches, each face half lost in shadow, each whisper sharp enough to cut. The weight of accusation, rumor, and fear pressed against the stone walls like a living presence. The doors groaned open. 2 Templars were led inside, limping, bruised, their white mantles shredded to rags. Men who had once ridden into battle with the force of a storm now moved like ghosts, hollow but unbroken. Their chains scraped against the floor. The inquisitors waited behind a long wooden table, the edges carved with symbols of the church, crosses, vines, and judgment. They did not rise. They merely watched, quills poised, their eyes cold and clinical. The first Templar, Brother Raymond, raised his chin despite the trembling in his legs. His beard was matted with dried blood, his lips were split, but his eyes still held the hard glint of a soldier who had seen death too often to fear it. A clerk stepped forward. "State your name," he said. Raymond's voice was hoarse but steady. "Raymond of Poitiers, Knight of the Temple, servant of God." A ripple moved through the spectators, some pity, some disbelief, some satisfaction. The inquisitor at the center leaned forward, fingers folding like a spider closing its legs. "You stand accused of denying Christ, spitting upon the cross, consorting with demons and worshipping false idols. Do you deny these charges?" Raymond's jaw tightened. "I do, every last word. Lies crafted by cowards and swallowed by fools." Gasps filled the hall. The inquisitor smiled faintly, as if pleased. "Your previous confession," he said, lifting a parchment, "states otherwise, signed by your hand." Raymond didn't look at the document. "That confession was beaten into me in a dungeon. No man speaks truth with his bones breaking." A murmur spread, some voices angry, others uneasy. The inquisitor gestured, and 2 guards stepped forward. They unrolled another parchment, unfurling it like a banner of guilt. "Do you deny, then," the inquisitor continued, "that your order practiced secret rites, that in your initiation you were commanded to renounce Christ, that you worshipped a severed head?" Raymond's eyes blazed. "I deny all of it. The order of the temple serves God. We bled for him. We died for him. We—" A guard struck him across the mouth. The hall fell silent. The inquisitor sighed, as though disappointed by the interruption. "Bring in the next witness." 2 more Templars were dragged in, both older, both broken. One struggled to breathe, the other stumbled, his legs barely obeying him. The inquisitor turned toward the crowd, projecting his voice like a bishop delivering a sermon. "These men have confessed," he declared. "They admit the order's corruption. They admit the devil's influence. Their words will stand as truth before God and King." One of the battered men lifted his head. "We confessed nothing," he cried. "Your torturer tore the truth from our tongues and replaced it with your lies." The crowd erupted, some shocked, some outraged, some delighted. The inquisitor tapped the table with 2 fingers, a signal. Guards seized the man and forced him to his knees. "The pyre awaits the unrepentant," the inquisitor said calmly, "but mercy is granted to those who accept the truth of their sins." The man spat blood onto the floor. "Then I will burn, and may God judge you for what you've done." A hush fell. Even the spectators who came for entertainment seemed shaken. The inquisitor looked to the scribes, who dutifully wrote every word. The trial continued, hour after hour, day after day. Templars dragged in chains, accusers whispering from behind veils, confessions stamped with seals, though the men scarcely knew their own names after the torturers were done. The Pope hesitated from afar, torn between truth and the king's fury. Yet paper after paper arrived from Paris, each more insistent than the last. And the church, worn thin by politics and fear, finally bent. In 1312, a single decree sealed the order's fate. The Knights Templar were dissolved. Not by sword, not by battlefield, but by ink, lies, and the power of a crown that feared them. Yet the fire meant to erase them had not yet burned. For one man still remained. And he would not go quietly. Chapter 6: The Execution of Jacques de Molay. The river Seine whispered along the banks of Isle de la Cité, a grey mist curling around the ancient stones. Paris held its breath. Torches lit the fog with trembling flames, casting long shadows across the cobblestones where the crowds had gathered, drawn by curiosity, fear, and a grim fascination. A wooden pyre stood on the riverbank, soaked with oil that reeked of smoke and decay. Soldiers circled it, their spears lowered, not to restrain the condemned. Jacques de Molay was bound and weak, but to hold the crowd at bay. The last Grand Master of the Knights Templar emerged from the shadows of the city, shackles clinking with each deliberate step. Time had etched lines across his face. His beard was long, silvered with age and suffering, yet in his eyes burned a defiance that no dungeon, no torture, no betrayal could extinguish. Behind him, Geoffrey de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, was dragged forward, his chains clanging against the pyre's stone platform. Their eyes met, no fear, no regret, only the shared understanding of men who had faced death many times and found it meaningless without honor. The executioner unfurled the official decree, his voice slicing through the tense air. Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, you are hereby condemned for heresy, idolatry, and defiance against the Holy Church. By order of King Philip IV and the authority of the Pope, you shall die by fire. De Molay's chin lifted, unwavering. Then let it be by fire, he said, for truth is never consumed. The crowd stirred, uncertain how to react to a man who accepted death so calmly. Priests crossed themselves, some in fear, others in awe. The king's marshal barked the command to ignite the flames. Torches touched the oil-soaked wood. Fire erupted, climbing the pyre with a hungry roar. Heat swept across the riverbank, causing spectators to recoil. Smoke curled skyward, black and acrid. De Molay stood his ground. The white mantle of the Templar, frayed and dirt-streaked but still bearing the faint red cross, caught fire. The chains glinted red in the flickering light, but he did not falter. Geoffrey de Charny murmured prayers beside him. De Molay, however, remained silent, staring into the flames as though challenging the world itself. You have condemned us without cause, he shouted to the heavens, his voice carrying across the fog. You stain your hands with the blood of the innocent. King Philip, Pope Clement, you will answer before God for this treachery. The crowd gasped, some shrank back, others whispered of prophecy. The pyre roared, the flames consumed the wood, the mantle, the shadows of defiance that clung to the Grand Master. Even as the heat seared his flesh, de Molay's posture remained unbroken. Witnesses later swore he did not scream, he did not bend, he stood until the structure beneath him began to collapse. When he finally fell, it was a slow, inevitable giving way, like a great tower surrendering to time. The smoke thickened, the flames flared, and the wind carried whispers of a curse. By the year's end, both King Philip IV and Pope Clement would be dead, and the legend of the Knights Templar would refuse to die, retreating into shadow, into secrecy, into the stories that would haunt Europe for centuries to come. Chapter 7: The Legacy. The ruins of Templar fortresses stood scattered across Europe and the Holy Land, weathered by centuries of wind, rain, and human indifference. Moss crept over stone walls, and cracks ran through towers where once men had trained, prayed, and died. Yet even in decay, a sense of presence lingered, an echo of the brotherhood that had once dominated kingdoms and terrified their enemies. Wind whispered through empty halls and courtyards, carrying the faintest hints of footsteps and steel against stone. Scholars and travelers spoke in hushed tones, recounting tales of hidden treasure, secret vaults, and relics lost to time. In Paris, beneath layers of modern streets, some claimed to hear the faint scratching of tools in ancient tunnels, the turning of locks in chambers sealed long ago. In Acre, local fishermen told stories of ghostly figures walking the battlements under the moon, their mantles catching the light of torches that had not burned in centuries. Whispers of the Templars endured because their power had been more than coin or conquest. It had been faith, discipline, and a singular unity of purpose. Even as kings rose and fell, even as popes decreed their dissolution, the order's influence persisted, hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of societies that had once feared them. Secret societies claimed descent from the Templars, tracing rituals, symbols, and codes through generations. Mysteries of the church and state, of treasure and knowledge, were often attributed to the order's unseen hand, a ghostly presence shaping history from the shadows. Treasure, relics, and arcane texts may have been lost, scattered, or destroyed. Yet the idea of the Templars, unyielding, incorruptible, formidable, continued to inspire awe, suspicion, and reverence. They became the subject of legends, of myths, of stories told in firelight and scriptorium halls alike. The red cross on white mantles may have faded, but the spirit endured. The lessons of loyalty, courage, and devotion were imprinted in memory, carried forward by those who would study, imitate, or honor them. 7 centuries passed, and still the Knights Templar were remembered, not merely as warriors or bankers, but as symbols of power and secrecy that transcended time. Across continents, their shadow remained, walking silently through history, whispering that while fire could consume flesh and ink could erase names, the essence of conviction, courage, and brotherhood could never be destroyed. And in quiet moments when ruins sigh with the wind, when crypts breathe the chill of ages, some swear they feel it. A presence that watches, waits, and endures, the echo of the Knights Templar, walking the earth unseen but never gone. Conclusion, the enduring story of the Knights Templar. Origins and purpose. The Knights Templar began as a brotherhood of 9 men with no wealth, no lands, and no title beyond that which they had claimed for themselves through faith and courage. Jacques de Molay, their first Grand Master, led them with a vision that transcended mere military engagement, a dedication to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, a vow to guard the sacred even at the risk of their lives. In those early days, the Brotherhood's simplicity belied the profound impact they would have on history. The formation of the Templars coincided with an era of immense religious, political, and social upheaval. The Crusades brought entire civilizations into violent contact, exposing the fragility of human order and the extremities of devotion. For the Templars, this context was not a backdrop, but a crucible in which their identity would be forged. Their vows required obedience, discipline, and a singular focus, the safeguarding of the faithful and the assertion of their presence as a moral and martial force. As these 9 men moved through the streets of Jerusalem, their resolve transformed them from a small, anonymous group into a symbol of relentless devotion. Each battle they faced, each ambush of pilgrims they thwarted, and each hardship endured contributed to a reputation that would spread far beyond the Holy Land. The Templars' early struggles were formative. They learned to operate without the full trappings of noble warfare, mismatched armor, scarce supplies, minimal reinforcements, but these hardships hardened them, instilling a unique combination of resourcefulness and ferocity. The granting of headquarters by King Baldwin II in the ruins of the Temple of Solomon marked a significant turning point. Here, in ancient chambers laden with history, the Templars found not only a base of operations, but also a connection to a sacred past. The depth of these chambers, their hidden crypts, and the aura of mystery surrounding them became intertwined with the Templars' identity. Whether or not relics or secret knowledge were found within these walls, the symbolism was immense. The knights were custodians of faith, warriors of God, and now stewards of history itself. Through their discipline and devotion, the Templars established a foundation that would allow them to endure the challenges of the Crusades, amass economic power, and eventually confront the betrayal that would define their place in history. Trials of the Crusades. The Crusades were more than military campaigns. They were existential tests for the Templars. Their engagement in battles such as Ascalon, Edessa, and Hattin showcased their exceptional skill, discipline, and courage. Each confrontation demanded precise coordination, unwavering focus, and an acceptance of death as an ever-present companion. The Templars' ability to maintain formation, shield civilians, and press forward under overwhelming odds became legendary. At Hattin, the heat and desert conditions transformed the battlefield into an inferno. Men collapsed from exhaustion, armor burned against their skin, and water became a precious commodity. Yet the Templars stood, holding lines that faltered under less resolute forces. Their steadfastness was both practical and symbolic, a living demonstration of faith manifested through martial prowess. Even when surrounded, facing certain capture or death, they chose defiance over surrender, cementing their reputation as warriors who would not yield. The psychological and emotional toll of constant warfare was immense. Templars were expected to maintain composure, uphold their vows, and protect others, all while enduring the horrors of prolonged conflict. This combination of spiritual and physical rigor created men who were disciplined beyond their peers. Their reputations spread not only through Europe but across enemy lines, inspiring both fear and respect. Enemies acknowledged their courage, chroniclers recorded their deeds, and the image of the Templar as the ultimate warrior monastic became ingrained in the cultural consciousness.